So the question that was asked all week, this was the number one question across college football. What happens if Indiana loses? That was the question everybody asked more than any other question. What happens if Indiana loses? Nobody asked the question, including me. Nobody asked the question, what if Indiana loses and Ole Miss loses and Texas A&M loses and Alabama loses? Well, it looks like Indiana's right back where they started. Appreciate you being here, the voice of college football. What a day of college football. What a night of college football. I enjoyed that Texas A&M-Auburn game. Unlike just about any other game this season. I thought that was a heck of a football game. There was a great broadcasting team, Dave Fleming and Louis Riddick doing the game. Exceptional, two of the very best. And I know that they don't typically team up together, but that was a great broadcast, a great production, and a remarkable game. Texas A&M and Auburn, just a fun game to watch. All right, the big happenings on the day, of course. Ohio State defeats Indiana 38-15. Indiana was in the game for a half plus. So was it competitive? You be the judge. I will let you know what I think. 38-15 is the final. And therefore, Indiana seemingly was in a bad spot at that point. But Alabama plays deplorable football. Oklahoma, nobody talks about this. Nobody gives them any credit for this. I know that they're bad. I know that the record was horrible. I know that they're unwatchable. All of those things because the offense sucks. However, I seem to be the only one in America talking about how good their defense is. I've mentioned that to a number of people. I had some people call me a few weeks ago that will remain unnamed here because I called them morons because they didn't know that the Oklahoma defense was one of the best in the country. They talked about that Oklahoma sucks, and I understand that they suck overall, or they did up until tonight. But I let that individual and others know they've got one of the best defenses in the country. Well, some people found that out tonight. Alabama goes down 24-3. Did I see that coming? No. I did not see that coming. I even picked Alabama to cover the spread. And maybe I should have thought a little bit more about home field advantage. And I should have thought a little bit more about what my pick was at Auburn, which I did pick Auburn to win. Yes. And Florida, Ole Miss, I scarfed up those 10 or 11 points and said, this is going to be a heck of a game. And that was a heck of a game as Jackson Dart threw 3 interceptions. Okay, 2 that counted to throw away the game late for Ole Miss against Florida. And the Gators win, and Billy Napier looks like a genius at this point compared to us dunderheads who thought that he should be fired. And then up in Minneapolis, Penn State and Minnesota, I knew that that was going to be a great game. I practically knew. None of us know anything until the games are played, but I was counting on that one being a good one. I did pick Minnesota to pull off the upset, and they should have. And there's a lot to uncover right there. All right, let's get to the scores. Let's get to your calls. And again, this just underlines that college football is kind of crazy. And I still think we're going to wind up pretty much close to where we expected to wind up, that with all this mayhem involving all these teams that are kind of second tier, what are we seeing emerge? Ohio State, Oregon, Georgia, Texas, don't we? Okay, let's get to the scores and take your calls. So I've got to say this is a bit upsetting to me because part of my college football season is to watch rivalry games and to watch USC and UCLA play. They should not be playing at 10:30 at night Eastern time zone. I don't like this. Will I go back and watch this game? Probably not. Maybe I'll run through it. We'll see. UCLA leads 10-9 over USC. I thought that this was going to be a dogfight to the end too. And apparently it is. There's about 5 minutes left in the third quarter, And this game outside of rivalry and pride is meaningless. Both of these teams are marginal at best. UCLA leads 10-9. Nevada 12, Air Force 7, couple bad football teams in the Mountain West. Fresno State leads Colorado State 28-7. The significance here is that Colorado State is in line to play in the Mountain West Conference Championship game against Boise State. But if they lose, then we'd have to look at tiebreakers between UNLV and Colorado State. All right, we won't go to the scores from today. You probably are aware of what happened today and again tonight. The three big games in the SEC today and tonight were, of course, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and Bama going down to defeat. All right, let's line them up here. Right here at the Voice of College Football, we've got Rob on the line.
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I think it was a good day for our teams. Not that you have a team, right?
No, I don't have a team. No. No team for me.
Yeah, I mean, I did think Ohio State was going to win. I mean, there was some special teams blunders there for Indiana, but I mean, there was, even with those special teams blunders, there was no doubt in that second half who the better team was. And I made a comment earlier on your Ohio State reaction video that I thought that was the best game Ohio State's played all year, and I still stand by that. I had some people in the comments saying, "Oh, Penn State was the best that they've played." Well, in some respects, yes, they went to Happy Valley and won. So that's more impressive. But this was a complete game, like a really good game in that second half. And they kind of flexed their muscles in the second half against a good team. Like I think people are kind of crapping on Indiana now because they lost, by a lot of points. But like I said, there were some things that definitely didn't go Indiana's way. Not that it mattered. I mean, after again the second half, Ohio State again flexed their muscles. But hey, they're the number 2 team. Indiana's the number 5 team, or at least they were. I still think Indiana's a pretty good team, and they're gonna, I think they'll bounce back. I don't think they were exposed as being some kind of horrible, fraudulent team, as some people think they are. I think that was just a great game by Ohio State. And I think that game showed that they should be in the top, 2-3 teams in the country, if not number 1.
Yeah, I think that we can argue all day as to whether Ohio State played a better game against Penn State or against Indiana. I think Penn State's a better team than Indiana, not by a ton, but I think that they are. So, yeah, we could go back and forth. The games were played in different locations at different times, but Ohio State certainly dominated the game against Indiana more so than they did against Penn State. They only gave up 150 yards in this game. They basically gave up a 75-yard touchdown drive on the first drive, and then they gave up a 75-yard touchdown drive when it didn't matter, when the game was over, and it was 31-7. And otherwise, Ohio State's defense gave up nothing.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, though. Like, at least Indiana scored with their offense. I mean, the Penn State thing, they were just relying pretty much only on their defense for that game.
Although Penn State probably moved the ball more than Indiana, but you're right. Indiana did score a legitimate offensive touchdown. Well, they scored 2. 1 didn't matter.
Right.
But I guarantee Penn State had a lot more than 150 yards of total offense.
Right. No, like you said, it's I mean, in the end, the only thing that matters is they both lost. I mean, Penn State did lose at home, so that's also, something. But
yes,
I still think Ohio State just proved that they are just that good. Their roster finally, to me, like I said, I think this was the most dominant win. Maybe not the best win, but this was the most dominant win because it's a top 5 matchup, and they just ran away with it against a good Indiana team. Like I said, that's a good team. It's not like a great team, not like an elite team, but they're a really good team. And Ohio State just flexed and just beat them soundly. As for my team, the Irish, I thought it was funny. Like, pretty much, at least most pundits now were picking Notre Dame to win that game big, except for the Crane and Company. I forget his name, but anyways, I just thought it was funny. If you look at the time of possession on that game, Army had doubled. They had double the time of possession of Notre Dame, and they still lost 49-14. And it really wasn't 49-14. Notre Dame put their second and third stringers in for defense at the end of that game, and Army scored a late touchdown with like 30 seconds left or something against Notre Dame's backups on backups. It really should have been like 49-7, but whatever. It's still a dominant win, and they did it with only 20 minutes of basically offensive time of possession, which is nuts. So that one felt pretty good. I think I'm not going to jump on the Notre Dame is a natty contender quite yet, like CBS and Dave Pollock and Greg McElroy. A lot of people are saying Notre Dame is, one of the, top, like if they play like they've been playing lately, could they win a natty? Oh, absolutely. But you got to prove it to me that you can do it for 3 straight games against really quality competition. So yeah, they just need to take care of business against USC and then punch their ticket in and see what happens.
Yeah, the more this season goes along and the more I see all these teams faltering, the more I give credit to Notre Dame for not faltering. So if they continue to dominate teams, regardless of what we think of them, they are playing complete games. And we know that they're more talented than Indiana. So they're not just playing flawless football. And when I say flawless, the really good football, sound football, let me term it that way, against just really awful teams or marginal teams. But we know that Notre Dame's a much more talented team than Indiana. So I tend to give it more staying power. And I think that I'm starting to give more thought to Notre Dame possibly making a run in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, they're currently 5th in betting odds to win the Natty right now. Obviously, Ohio State, or no, I think Oregon's still number 1. I think Ohio State's 2. I could be wrong. Actually, it might be Ohio State number 1. I know they're either 1 or 2, but
that's what I heard today during the Fox broadcast. Ohio
State
I think number 1.
Yeah, I think Ohio State is. I think they're plus 240 to win, which is insane. But yeah, I mean, either way, I mean, just what a crazy game! What a crazy day of college football. I mean, I'm going to jump off here in just a moment because I know you probably got a million callers lined up. But Alabama losing to Oklahoma. Hey, props to Sooners fans if you're in the chat. That was an insane game. I did not have that on my bingo card. And how about Kansas taking Colorado to the woodshed there?
Yeah, I guess we could have seen that coming. Kansas was considered a better team to start the season, and I just think anyone in the Big 12 outside of Arizona and a couple other teams are capable of winning games against each other. So, that was no big surprise. It was only a 2.5 point spread, but yeah, Kansas is on a roll right now. They've beat 3 ranked teams in a row.
Yeah. They're wrecking people's seasons.
Yeah, they are.
It's funny. Hey, you know what? When you don't have anything to play for, that's what you play for, right? And that's what worries me about this USC game coming up. Notre Dame's got to keep the eye on the prize because USC will actually, they will absolutely be playing to wreck Notre Dame's season. So
yeah, I certainly agree with that and see that playing out more often through the years than I do teams folding. I got to give these guys credit and these teams credit that they typically step up and they let it all hang out and they play wild and they play free with nothing on the line rather than folding up the tents and giving up and not putting out an effort.
Oh yeah. And that you just reminded me, props to freaking Florida, man. Like those players deserve like a giant round of applause.
Yeah.
I am shocked. Like that to me, that was even more shocking to me personally than Alabama losing to Oklahoma. Just because I know Alabama was technically, they lost to an unranked Oklahoma team. Nobody really saw that coming, but I just thought, in my personal opinion, I thought Ole Miss was the best team in the SEC. They looked, the way they dominated Georgia, I really thought they were going to turn the page, and nope. Florida just, beat them up. They dominated them on the lines. It was pretty crazy. So props to Florida. I'm going to jump off here, Mark. I know you got a million callers, so always fun talking to you.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate you being here.
Yep.
It's almost like Troy has been watching for a long time and watching a lot, because I think Troy's gotten me nailed on this one. Let's super chat Mark into 4 hours of show. He'd be happy but mad at the same time. Troy, uh, uh, it's like you got into my psyche. That's it. But I think we're working on an hour show. The way the super chats are piling up as we stand right now, I think we're looking at an hour. But again, what amuses me about this day more than anything is that Indiana, everybody waiting for Indiana to lose, including myself, which considering I picked Ohio State to win 38-17 and it was 38-15, I pretty much, the game pretty much went exactly the way I thought it was going to go. Ohio State's defense always starts slow. The offense starts slow too. Ohio State just flat out always starts slow. They were down 7-0, like they're down 7-0 almost every week, even when they play the likes of UAB, down 7-0, give up a touchdown, and then they kick it into gear and they steamroll and they get better and better and better and better as the game goes on. And so, yeah, 38-17 was my score, is 38-15. But what amuses me so much is that Indiana has lost this game. Most people would consider that to be a blowout. I don't really consider it a blowout. I consider it a decisive win. There is no comparison between the two teams, but it was not like this annihilation, 28-0 at half. It was 14-7 at half. But with those three teams in the SEC losing, where is Indiana dropping? Where are they going to drop? Are we going to raise a Miami team that has not beaten anyone either? Are we going to raise them above Indiana? I don't know. We'll look at it. I'm not prepared to make those rankings off the top of my head. And as our guy Michael knows, I will do my top 25 that actually makes sense. Michael, how you doing tonight?
Good, Mark. Yourself?
I am doing just fine.
Crazy, crazy, crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy.
All right, I gotta ask you this. I don't know. You watched this whole game just like I did. In my opinion, there are 3 plays today that changed the whole outcome of the game. For
what game are we talking about? You said, did you watch this game today? Well, I watched about 8 games today.
Well, I tried to also, but I don't have 5,000 TVs like you do either.
I just have a lot of computer screens. I've got a TV that's like 15 years old, and I haven't even turned it on since I've lived here for 9 months. I just watch on laptops. Anyway, go ahead. Nobody cares how I watch these games.
True, but no, there's 3 plays in my opinion that changed the game. The way the game went for Ohio State today in Indiana.
Okay.
And I think it was late first quarter into the second quarter when they was like third in the flight. Anytime if you're like third and 30 something, I consider that a flight to get to first down.
Third and 40. Yes.
Well, I think it was like more than that, but anyway, I digress. But that's why I call it third in the flight. But on those 2 plays, how they got to both end up getting the first down.
Yeah.
On those third and fourth down plays.
Okay.
And then to me, when they tied the game up, it was just and then also on the muff punt. When that happened with IU, I said, "Yep, this game's over. Ohio State's going to end up winning it."
Okay, I just want to make sure, Michael, that I'm not misinterpreting something. Are you telling me that there were 3 plays separating those 2 teams?
Well, I mean, I knew going into the game Ohio State was going to win.
Okay.
But I'm saying the way they was playing, had Indiana stopped him on the third and 30 plus, I think it was, you might have got the ball in good field position. Who knows what could have happened? It could have maybe ended up being
you know what would have happened? Ohio State would have taken about 5 more minutes to start beating their brains in. That's what would have happened.
Sure, but you never know.
Okay. So Michael, this is where I have an exception with what you're saying here. Like when somebody calls or we have a discussion on a game and what could have changed the game, I think of things like bad officiating calls. I think of things like a missed exchange on a mesh play where the other team had nothing to do with it and a team just coughed up the football because They made a bad exchange. They made a unforced error, something like that. But when you're talking about a team converting on 3rd and 40, that team, their talent, their speed, their athleticism, their play calling, their ability made the play.
Yeah,
There was no luck involved.
They also had to get the rest of the yard because they went for it on 4th down also. So
I know they went for it on 4th down and 4th down and 10.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm shaking my head as that's happening, and I'm thinking this is just one example of what's the huge chasm between these two teams is that there are very few teams in the country that could pull that off.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying, in my opinion, that's what, because I'm saying if IU would have got to stop. But what's to say they couldn't?
I think that there was one huge difference between these two teams.
Which is?
One of them showed up and one didn't. And one would show up anytime that they played and the other one wouldn't. There's just, these two teams are just, one of them is arguably the best team in the country and the other one's like the 15th or 20th best team in the country.
Yeah, I can say that. Now the key question is, how far does Indiana fall next week?
I don't think they should. Well, I'm not going to answer that for sure because I need to dive into the results and really look at it. But off the top of my head, not thinking they should fall at all. I don't know where they're going to fall.
I can pretty much guarantee they will be number 2 in your top 25 tomorrow.
Oh, whoa. Okay, those are two different things. Yeah, they're falling in my top 25, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm talking about the playoff rankings at number 5. True. Now they're going to figure out a way to drop them, but I don't know if that's justified. Well, Notre Dame, they'll move Notre Dame ahead of them, which I understand.
Yeah.
I generally understand. Although, again, Notre Dame's best win is Texas A&M. That win continues to be devalued.
Mm-hmm.
And Notre Dame's second best win is Louisville, which
has also been devalued.
Yes, exactly. And Indiana's beaten Washington, Nebraska. Michigan. They're a couple of bowl teams. They're on the same level as Louisville. Michigan, they're on the same level as Louisville. And this loss to Ohio State, it's not a good loss, but it's not a horrendous loss. If Notre Dame didn't have their brand and Indiana did not have their brand, Indiana would still be ranked ahead of Notre Dame. But I fully expect Notre Dame to pass Indiana in the playoff rankings.
Can they leapfrog Penn State also?
Notre Dame?
Yeah.
By beating Army?
Yeah, I mean it was a close game with Penn State and Minnesota today. It was a 1-point win. And I have seen it happen before, but not very often in the playoffs.
Notre Dame was 6, right?
Yeah.
And Penn State was 4.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll have all sorts of issues if they vault Notre Dame past Penn State based on beating Army.
Okay.
But I don't know where Indiana's going to drop. I know that they'll drop that one spot, but all these teams in the SEC just lost.
Yeah. And there's an opportunity because I think Georgia play Georgia Tech next week.
Yes.
Is that in Athens or is it down in Atlanta?
That's a great question. I believe it's in Athens because they played at the Dome in Atlanta last year.
Okay. And that's not going to give me a win for Georgia next week, is it?
I don't think so.
Can Tennessee lose at Vanderbilt next week?
Yes.
Okay. And then if Texas A&M loses, that's going to be 6 teams in the SEC with 9-3. What happened?
Well, Texas A&M already lost. You mean if Texas A&M beats Texas?
No. Doesn't Texas A&M already? Do they have 2 losses or 3 losses now?
They have 3.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to think. Wait a minute. Or I would think that would be 5 teams with 3 losses. How are they going to figure that juxtaposition out?
They have to figure it out just like they were going to figure it out when they had 2 losses. They have to evaluate their resumes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a whole lot of confidence that they're going to do that effectively, but that's what they need to do.
Yeah. Is BYU in trouble?
Oh, yeah, they're in trouble.
So who do they get next week to end the season?
They play. That's a great question. I don't know off the top of my head. I think they play. I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head, but yeah, we're going to have to sort through the Big 12. I'll be working on videos in the next 2 days to sort out all these conference races and CFP situations.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they play
Because
Houston next Saturday.
we've got a 4-way tie for first place in the Big 12.
Yeah, and BYU plays Houston.
Houston, okay?
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah.
BYU
BYU is showing us that they're really not that good of a football team. They're okay, but they're not playoff worthy.
Yep. Tip of the cap to Rock Jock Dayhawk today.
Yes.
Not bad. Oh, and the reason why Troy said that is because there's people saying, "Is Mark ever going to get in here? Mark ever going to get in here?"
Who was saying that?
No, there's people in the chat while we was waiting for you to start the stream.
Yeah.
Saying like, "Is Mark ever going to get in here?" And we had to tell them that you're still doing the instant analysis and stuff. So, because I think what it is they go by from what you post. The start time is with YouTube. You post it in the search box or something like that.
Yes.
And then they think, okay, but then as we all know, that's not a concrete deal because it can always change. So
exactly. Anything else, Mike?
have a great night, and I'll see you in about 10 hours.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Michael.
Right,
have a good night.
You too.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I would like to be on as soon as the primetime games are over, but it's become rather obvious that we can do better by posting these instant analysis videos. So I need to get those done. So that's what goes on there. But yeah, it would be my preference to be on here immediately after the game. So I'm rushing, trying to get 2 videos done as soon as those games are over. And obviously the Auburn Texas A&M game went forever. We got Minnesota Dave stopping by here at the Voice of College Football.
Hey, how's it going, Mark?
Hi, Dave. I'm doing just fine. Sorry about your Gophers.
Well, I don't believe in moral victories because moral victories are for teams like Wyoming that almost beat Boise State.
Yeah.
Hey, you just, you can't turn over the ball against Penn State. It costed you 6 points. And that's what cost you the game today.
What I found kind of interesting in that game was when James Franklin ran that fake punt.
Yeah.
I don't want to say I knew that he was going to run one, but that's what was going through my mind. He should run a fake punt right now. And he probably will, because once they stopped Drew Aller short of the first down line by like a half yard, I thought this is a perfect opportunity to run a fake punt.
Yeah, and I thought to myself at the time, was thinking, okay, it's too far back down the field. Do you want to risk that?
Sure.
And I thought they were going to punt and have their defense was playing well enough to probably stop the Gophers. So I was kind of like, at least we got the stop. And we're going to get the momentum. And my friend even said the same thing because I invited him to watch the game with me. We were at the game, of course, because, I have season tickets. And he said to me, they're going to fake punt. And I'm like, they're not going to fake punt. Not in this position, not this far back. And they did it. And I was like, oh, gosh. That's when my heart started sinking down. That's when I kind of knew that they were going to run out the clock. Because it was actually a perfect time to really run a fake punt because if you think about it, Mark, Minnesota was getting the momentum. I don't think if they ran a regular play, I don't think they would have gotten it. Because I think Minnesota's momentum would have broken through because they were stopping like Penn State on a couple key fourth down chances they were trying to go for earlier in the game. So I really felt that they could have done this, but I don't blame PJ for going for the field goal because now you're down by one. All it takes is a field goal to win the game if you get the ball back, and it's only like just 5 minutes and what was it 48 seconds. That's you think to yourself that's plenty of time, But that fake punt just really took the momentum and the sales out of the stadium. But oh well. I mean,
Were you there?
oh yeah, I'm a season ticket holder, Mark.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah, I go to the games all the time. So I was, excited, and it was a great game. It was fun. I mean, everything that you would want in a game happened. When you thought you'd lose momentum before you got into the half, they blocked the extra point and take it all the way to the house. It was, the crowd erupted. And it was just such a well-coached game by both sides. Both sides took chances. Both sides, did what they had to do to win that game. This was, like I said, like the only thing that hurt Minnesota is those 2 turnovers. I mean, if they got 2 turnovers, maybe this would have been a different story, but they did not. So it's painful. It's painful, but it like I said, I don't believe in moral victories, but dang, that one was that one I hope they just get, they get over it, they get mad, and they take it on the Badgers in Madison.
Yeah, you got to hope that. Minnesota's the better team. I got to say that. Wisconsin's not as good as Minnesota, but that doesn't mean they can't win the game. I thought Minnesota played a better game than Penn State. I thought they were the better team, but obviously Penn State made the plays. It's not like anybody got ripped off or anything. I do think, though, that at the end of the first half,
the pass interference call, that was nowhere close.
That was a horrible pass interference.
That was if anything, it should have been offensive pass interference. He pushed off the guy.
The ball was also uncatchable.
Oh yeah.
Plus, it wasn't pass interference. So, do you remember what down that was?
Oh, I think that was 3rd down, Mark.
Yes, exactly. So that stops the drive, and Penn State ends up scoring a touchdown.
Yeah.
That's a terrible call.
It was the whole crowd just booed. And I'm one of those guys that, kind of like, I don't want to get mad at the referees, but when it's an obviously bad call, it was just, oh my God, that peed off everybody. Everybody was booing the refs. Everyone was screaming out, "Refs, you suck." That was starting to be chanted out after the touchdown was scored, and then all of a sudden you get the blocked extra point, and everyone's like, "Oh wow, I guess it doesn't matter. We're gonna go into halftime with the lead." But yeah, it was one heck of a game, Mark. It was one heck of a game. It's what I expected it to be. I was getting annoyed with a lot of Penn State fans that were like basically saying that the Gophers are going to be taken to the wood chipper and end up losing this game by by 30 or 25. And I'm like, you guys are have your head so far up your butt if you think you're going to win this game this easily.
Yeah.
But,
I picked Minnesota to win.
Yeah, I know. We talked about it. I think it was yesterday.
Yeah, I pulled the trigger on that one.
But the other upsets were just so great. And I'm going to say this, and I know Jackson's not going to be happy with what I'm about to say, but I love Auburn's fight song. That's such a great fight song.
Auburn's fight song. I would have to play it to remember it.
Oh,
I cannot like hear it in my mind.
Dun, 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 dun.
It's coming back to me.
That's all I remember from it. It's a great fight song.
You're a little bit shy of perfect pitch there, Dave, but I kind of get the gist.
Yeah, I know. But man, I was watching the Wyoming game in Boise, and I'm like, gosh, this would be the biggest upset of all the upsets today, because Boise was supposed to blow them out, and I was like, gosh, this is still a game. And then they took the lead with around 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and I thought to myself, my God, Boise scores the touchdown on. Boise started their running back ended up, remembering he is awesome, and ended up, making some great freaking breaking tackles, and ended up just scoring the touchdown. And then you're just like, okay, still they have a chance to win. And unfortunately, it just didn't happen. But that would have been there was just a lot of big upsets, and man, the college football playoff committee is going to have a field day with all the upsets.
Or we're going to have a field day evaluating their selections.
Oh yeah, believe me, we will. And I'm just going to say this. It doesn't matter what your record is now. It's rivalry week. It
is. It's one of my favorite weeks of the year.
It is for me too, Mark. Hey, Mark, I'll talk to you later.
All right, Dave. Thanks for calling.
Okay. Bye-bye.
So for those people that say throw out all the records, it's rivalry week. I don't quite take it to that extreme. I would love to have that proven to me. I think that's another one of those sports myths that don't exist. The better team wins rivalry games just like any other game. But it is rivalry week, and I love all the rivalries. And we've got one tonight with USC and UCLA, and I like to watch that game. I bet I have missed very few USC UCLA games since I've been watching college football. Let's get to these super chats before we take our next call. Seattle Skier, thank you so much for the contribution. We appreciate you. We got Ripstar. John D. from Michigan is an escalator who abuses power, and we want him off the show. We ask for his suspension. I'm going to take that as a joke. Thanks for the super chat. I appreciate that, Ripstar. Then Ripstar also says, no, this is Troy coming in with this one. What a great day of football. These bad slate weeks are always fun. Go Bucks. Yes, we can't judge the schedule necessarily. We can't necessarily anticipate which games are going to be great. We can't. I totally agree with that. There's a difference between meaningful games and great games. There's a difference between what are projected great matchups and then what turn out to be great games. I anticipated this being a great day because I thought Texas A&M-Auburn is going to be a great game. I did think Florida had a shot against Ole Miss. I did not anticipate Oklahoma and Alabama, and that was not a great game. The only thing that made it worth watching, obviously, is because when there's a bad game, but it's an upset, then it becomes a good game because it's interesting. And then, again, Penn State and Minnesota, I anticipated that being a great game. I did think that Ohio State would have few issues with Indiana. I did not see any of the BYU-Arizona State game except for the crazy finish. And let's see, we've got fuzzy balls here. Based on all the teams that lost, isn't the South Carolina versus Clemson a de facto play-in game? Assuming Miami beats Syracuse, there's a chance the ACC gets two teams in. Yes, there is. So South Carolina, if they beat Clemson, they're 9-3. Clemson is going to be 10-2 if they win this game against South Carolina. And if of course, Miami loses to Syracuse, then Clemson will move on to the ACC championship game. No, it's not a de facto play-in game, but I get your point. It's a very important game, and it's become an important game that we did not anticipate just 24 hours ago to be a college football playoff impacting game. But to say it's a de facto play-in game, why would it be a play-in game? Because we've got Alabama, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Georgia involved, all these other teams involved with 3-2 losses. And Clemson is not going to win any tiebreaker against an SEC team. They just won't. They don't play the schedule. They obviously lost to Georgia by 1,000,000 points. They'll win the tiebreaker against South Carolina if they win the game. So there's way too much involved there to try to weed through that. But yeah, you make a valid statement, but you might be a little bit off on your terminology about being a de facto play-in game. All right. And Rob is letting us know his top 6. And this must be in order. Oregon 1, Ohio State 2, Texas 3, Penn State 4, Notre Dame at 5, and number 6 is Georgia. And Seattle Skier, thank you so much for the contribution. We appreciate another contribution from you. All right, let's get back to the phone lines here at the Voice of College Football. And this is, by the way, the College Football Show. And we got Adam here.
Hey, Mark, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. What a crazy day it was today. Thanks for taking my call. I just have a few questions for you. You know, after Alabama's lost to OU and Ole Miss losing to Florida, BYU, Texas A&M, Colorado losing, are you prepared to say on this show tonight that if South Carolina defeats Clemson, that they should absolutely be in the college football playoff?
Absolutely no, because
why?
What do we have here? Let me get my sheet ready here, because we're going to have a 9-3 Alabama team. We're going to have a 10-2, most likely Tennessee team, a Georgia team that's 10-2. We're going to have an Ole Miss team that's 9-3. Okay, so we're going to have 4 teams make it from the Big Ten, correct?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Okay, so if we've got 4 from the Big Ten, and we've got, let's say we only have 1 from the ACC, 1 from the Big 12, 1 from the Group of 5, and Notre Dame, we're at 8. Okay? That's 8. We've got 4 spots left. And we've got Texas, who can either finish 11-1 or 10-2. We've got Texas A&M, who's either going to finish 9-3 or 8-4. And we got Bama 9-3, Tennessee 10-2, Georgia 10-2, Ole Miss 9-3, and then if South Carolina wins, they're 9-3. So we've got 7 teams fighting for 4 spots.
Correct.
And South Carolina lost to Ole Miss by 24 points. They lost to Alabama by 2. And so they've got an 0-2 record against these teams they're competing against.
So South Carolina would be on a 6-game winning streak, be the hottest team in college football, and as Tim Tebow said, the team that nobody wants to play. So why would you deny them a spot given the results of the other teams recently?
Well, if it comes down to South Carolina and Ole Miss, I'm taking the team that won the game. If it comes down to South Carolina and Alabama, I'm taking the team that won the game. If it comes down to South Carolina and any of these other teams, then I cannot answer that question sitting right here, because I'd have to sit down and go through the schedule and rank the wins and assess the resume.
Yeah, I would disagree with you on using head-to-head as a barometer, because the South Carolina game was in Tuscaloosa, where they lost by 2. And,
Yep.
I think there's certain variables that, if circumstances were different, the result might be different. But I respect your opinion, certainly. My second question is, and this might seem controversial, but I think Penn State should not even be in the playoff. I think they have conclusively shown that they are a mediocre team and that they have zero chance of competing for a national championship. What's the justification for Penn State being in the college football playoff?
So South Carolina's lost 3 games, correct? They've lost to Kentucky not Kentucky. Who have they lost to? They lost to Alabama. They lost to LSU. And they lost to Ole Miss. Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
And I was just going to say, Penn State has lost to maybe the best team in the country.
Yes, and they lost 26-25 to Minnesota today. Some people would say that they beat Minnesota 26-25, but I consider that a loss. They look terrible. They're mediocre. And as far as you go, Tony, I would disagree with your comments and the way that you overstate my opinions. And yes, I do look beyond wins and losses. But why should Penn State be in there? They're mediocre. I don't care what their record is. They're mediocre.
And I just kind of fail to see where you're drawing this conclusion.
They've struggled on the road against nearly every team they've played. They beat a Minnesota team that's mediocre by 1 point. And I think they have zero chance of competing. And I think
South Carolina is struggling in its games too. They struggled against LSU and Alabama and Ole Miss.
Right. But they're on a 5-game winning streak, and they're the hottest team in college football right now. So
Penn State's on a winning streak too.
I could care less if Penn State's on a winning streak because their offense is about as anemic as it's always been. And this goes to the problem I have with these 12-team playoffs. We're engaged in a futile exercise of putting teams in that have no chance of winning. And I think – go ahead.
So do you believe in Vegas lines at all? Do you care what those are?
I don't look at them, but I suspect that they're fairly accurate to a degree, sure.
Okay. I don't know what Vegas would say about a Penn State-South Carolina game. I would think that Penn State would be a decent favorite.
Okay, fair enough.
I'm not saying that should settle the argument just because Vegas thinks something.
And I would like the people in the comments section who say that I'm being crazy to explain to me why you think Penn State should be in a playoff and give me a logical and factual argument, not stupid crap like, he's stupid and he's off base. Make a reasonable factual argument and then I will listen to you. But of course,
based on your logic, correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, okay? Please do. That if we took your logic to the playoffs, if you said head-to-head doesn't matter to you, then the actual playoffs don't matter because the head-to-head winner shouldn't advance in the playoffs if we think somebody else is better.
No, because there's a difference. Head-to-head matters to me. It matters to me based on the context. Head-to-head certainly matters if you're playing for a championship. But head-to-head earlier in the season on the road does not matter as much to me as how the teams perform later in the season. Are they trending upwards? Because if we're looking for the 12 best teams, I think that should matter. So I guess it's a philosophical difference. But again, when I look at the comments section, I would love to hear an actual factual argument by you guys instead of just ad hominem attacks, because without that, your credibility is really zero. My third and last question, or a very quick 2 questions, Mark, is at the beginning of the season, I said Notre Dame is going to contend for the national championship. And these same folks here in the comments section said, I should see a psychiatrist, get on Prozac, join the circus. Well, now we see Notre Dame creeping up ever so slowly. And I'm starting to think that maybe that prediction was accurate. What are your thoughts on Notre Dame?
Did you predict that Notre Dame was going to contend for the national championship, or did you predict that Notre Dame was going to win the national championship?
I predicted that they would win it.
Okay. I don't have much confidence that Notre Dame's going to win the national championship, but it wouldn't be a huge shock to me. I think that there are 4 or 5 teams that are better, but that's not many. I think that they're in the discussion. I think that they are a really good team. I think they're one of the 6 or 7 best teams in the country.
Okay, fair enough. And for those in the comments section that are talking, and I'll just be one more minute. For those who are talking about, the records of the teams matter. You remind me of the people who supported TCU being in the playoff, a TCU team that lost to Kansas State, that was put in over Alabama anyway, an Alabama team that destroyed Kansas State and that lost 65-7 to Georgia. So my last question for you, Mark, is: do you believe that the 12-team playoff is useful, given the fact that there's such incongruity in results, and because we could probably narrow down the 3 or 4 teams that really are in the hunt for the national title?
Well, I don't think it's perfect by any stretch. I think it's flawed, but I think it's a good tension between honoring wins and losses, the results on the field, and honoring some kind of perspective on who should be there.
Right.
Meaning that we're sitting in a place right now where we've got 4 teams in the Big 12 that have 2 losses in the conference, and I believe Colorado is the only team that has a loss outside the conference. So 3 of them are 9-2, and the other one's 8-3, and none of them have much of a chance of making the playoffs, other than the championship spot, of course, because they're not going to be given by the committee that type of credit. But we do honor that championship team from the Big 12. I think that that's a reasonable place to. We know that the conferences aren't equal, but if we aren't going to honor the conference championships, then I don't understand really what we're doing or why we're playing. So I think the tension between those 2 philosophies is pretty healthy.
Yeah, and the reason I don't honor necessarily conference championships is because I do not honor the champion of the Big 12 and automatically think that team should be in the playoffs. And no, I don't hate Penn State, but I don't think Penn State has any chance of being successful. And with their win today, they've showed that they're mediocre. So I do think South Carolina should be in it. And I think, though, at the end of the day, Texas, Oregon, and Ohio State are the 3 teams that are going to be in the running for the national title. I think everything else is superfluous. Thanks for taking my call, Mark, and for spending 10 minutes. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Yeah, there's certainly a thought out there that the wins and losses are everything. Wins and losses, regardless of who you play, the schedule, and so forth, that you're going to simply go with the teams that won the games. And I don't disrespect that viewpoint. I do think we need to look at schedules and the competition. So I think that there needs to be a healthy balance between the 2. Penn State will have gone through, if they are going to complete the season, which we all anticipate they're going to take care of Maryland next week. They will have gone through a Big Ten schedule at 11-1, and their one loss was against maybe the best team in the country by 1 score, a game in which they had the ball at the 1-yard line on multiple occasions to tie or win the game. So, I think every team out there has performed to mediocre standards many weeks, especially once you get down to 3 loss teams and you get to teams like look at Alabama tonight. Look at Alabama tonight. Look at Alabama against Vandy, and look at Alabama against, what was their other loss? Tennessee. Okay. The SEC, this was not a good night for the SEC. Now, it could be argued that this shows the strength of the SEC. I don't necessarily agree with that. I still think it's the best conference top to bottom, but we're not so concerned with the 40th best team in the country or the 10th best team in a conference. The SEC, I do believe, is the best conference, and I could lay all the metrics out and the facts and the results to basically not prove that, but give a strong indication in that direction. But at the top, the SEC is showing us that maybe those teams are not elite. Well, we know they're not elite because they can't win more than 75% of their games. All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. We got Mooley on the line.
Yes, sir.
Hey,
What
what's going on tonight?
weekend, Mark? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Look, what was that? That Bama game was a real disappointment. BYU coming back at the end. Like, where do I begin, Mark? Where is there anything that's on your mind? You tell me. What's something that's on your mind that you want
Well,
to
it's all on my mind. I am here to respond to all of you. So I can get on here at any point that I want to and talk. So I leave this up to you, and I answer your questions and respond to what you guys have to say. I can keep this going all day if I so choose. So I'm the guy with the YouTube channel, so I can talk whenever I want. So this is your time to show your opinion.
For sure. Okay. You guys kind of already touched on the last caller, which kind of I was like, ugh, I was waiting for this, but one thing I wanted to say is if there was one team in the country that must be really pissed today, it would be South Carolina, because the two teams that they lost to now have 3 losses and are probably going to be dropped out of the top 12. They should be dropped out of the top 12, like especially Bama. And now that's going to put like a little block in front of how far they can move up, even if they do come out and beat Clemson. Like there is a block. Like, not saying that South Carolina had a big chance to make the playoff, but they were still like, what if other teams lose and then South Carolina has a path in? No, that's done. And also BYU. Listen, I turned off that game like when it was like 28-7 because I was like, okay, this game's over. But then they made a comeback and they made it a competitive game. And now I'm looking at this BYU, like they fell 8 spots last week because they lost to Kansas. But now we can look at here and say, okay, Kansas isn't as bad of a team as we're making it out to be. This Kansas team has talent, and I mean, if anyone knows football, they should know that Kansas had the talent. I mean, look at how I think they won 9 games last season, and they returned quite a few of their star players. And most of their losses were like by 1 score. That besides the point. I'm saying all that to say we should probably drop Alabama and Ole Miss below BYU. Do I think the committee is gonna do that? No, but maybe we should put a little more respect, because maybe while they don't have the wins Bama and Ole Miss have, they still beat an SMU team that's going to be flirting with the top 10 now, and who just came off a pretty dominant victory. And
you think that BYU has a better resume than Alabama, and who?
Ole Miss, maybe not better resume. It's hard to say because the problem
Then why should they be ranked higher?
Because of how close they've lost, and they don't have the wins that
and Ole Miss didn't lose a close game today.
They did lose a close game, but they also have a loss to Kentucky as well.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And BYU lost to Kansas.
How do you evaluate Kansas as of now, though? Can you say Kansas? I mean, yes, I will agree. Florida is also a team that's trending in the right direction. I was really impressed by how the type of reads Lagway was making and how that defense stepped up as a whole.
Yeah, I don't think there's any comparison between Ole Miss's resume and BYU's resume.
Okay.
If we start throwing around Kansas as a quality win, and I get your point, they were good last year. They got off to a bad start. They obviously have righted some wrongs. We know they've got a really good coach, Lance Leipold. They've righted some wrongs. They beat 3 ranked teams the last 3 weeks. Well, how about Illinois? Illinois is going to probably be a 9-3 football team after they beat Northwestern this coming Saturday. They beat Kansas. Why don't we talk about Illinois? Illinois, 2 of their 3 losses were to Oregon and Penn State, 2 of the top 4 teams in the country.
I'm saying but this is not the same Kansas team. At least from what I see. At least from what I've seen. Again, I haven't been watching Kansas.
Illinois beat the bad Kansas team.
That's at least what the results are saying. Kansas losing a lot of games. Yes, they were all close, and Kansas was being competitive, but they were 2-6 at one point. So and now they came and beaten 3 of the better teams on their schedule.
Yeah, again, if you just want to honor records, then sure, BYU's got a better record than Ole Miss and whoever else you just named.
Bama.
But what is the best win that the entire Big 12 has won? The entire conference put together, outside the conference?
I'm not too sure. I haven't really kept up with them in the beginning of the season.
Probably Iowa.
Okay.
That would be the best win that I can come up with. I'll keep thinking. Let's see from team to team. Iowa. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Positive it's Iowa. I'll keep thinking. I'll keep going through every team off the top of my head.
Well, I was just saying I do think Bama and Ole Miss are better, but I think BYU.
Then why would you rank BYU above Alabama and Ole Miss? Just because they're 10-2, or they're 9-2 instead of 8-3?
Well, I don't.
And that's fine if that's what you believe.
No, I actually don't believe. I think last week I said the 2-loss SEC team should have been above Miami. I was just saying based on how competitive BYU has been in the games, but no, I definitely get your point, what you're saying for that.
All right, sir. Anything else?
Dang, sorry, you just stumped me for a second. How far do you think Arizona State should catapult after BYU? Do you think?
So let's understand, when the AP and the coaches poll put together their rankings, I know this well enough from talking to people that vote that they basically just kind of spitball everything. Like in your instance, what you're talking about is Arizona State was number 21 in the playoff rankings. And I know that's a different deal, but I'm just making a point. And so they think about, okay, Arizona State's number 21. They beat number 13. Therefore, we're going to, let's see, raise them about 5 spots to number 16. And then BYU was 13. We'll drop them to like 17. And so that's how they do things. And I think that's a very lazy way to do things. You basically, to do rankings properly, you have to reconstruct the entire season every week, basically, because you can't, not every situation is exactly the same. These teams can't be ranked in silos. So for example, Indiana was number 5. And let's say that was a proper ranking. Indiana was number 5 before today. Well, when they lost at noon today, the thought was, they're going to plummet, and they should plummet to whatever, 10, 11, 12. But then a bunch of teams behind them lost. So where are they going to fall now? So I'd have to go through. I can't tell you how high I'm going to rank Arizona State, because I got to go through every team. You could be the number 15 team in the country and beat the number 20 team in the country and not move. Or you could move 8 spots and it could be a legitimate move because of what happened around you. It again, it's not measured in a silo, in a vacuum.
Yeah, and one thing that, at least how I felt personally about the CFP rankings this year, it is they've really just copied the AP a lot, to the point where I feel like they just make a couple changes here and there just so it doesn't look like plagiarism. Like last week when they put Bama over Miami, it was like, okay, let's just make it a little bit different, not have all 4 of the SEC teams bunched up together. But
So
yeah, no.
I'll answer it this way. Arizona State was 21. They beat number 14. I'm going by the playoff rankings. I don't necessarily agree with these completely. I don't agree with them completely, but we're working off their rankings. So Arizona State was 21. Well, I would think on the strength of that win, they would move past Tulane, Army, Colorado,
A&M.
BYU, of course.
Well, no, maybe no, my bad, not A&M. A&M
And
has the
yeah,
head.
maybe I don't know. You would there's some consideration there for moving them past A&M. So they're going to move up about 5 spots, it appears. I don't see anybody else moving down below them other than the teams I just mentioned. So they'll probably move up 5 spots. If I was a betting man and somebody held a gun to my head and I had to nail the exact spot that the CFP was going to rank Arizona State, I'd say 16.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and after you defeated my BYU logic, now that I agree with you in that case, I don't see Arizona really catapulting that high, because they also have losses to Texas Tech and Cincinnati, and
Yeah.
with the way with the way that Big 12 is like there's no real clear dominant team, and I think that's what's really gonna hurt them, and that's gonna go to the point where, listen, with Bama and Ole Miss losing 3 losses, they may not be entirely out of this playoffs now. Because who do you like? Because
They're not.
because A&M, Colorado lost, Army lost. I'm looking at the next teams up. Do you think they'll put Clemson above Alabama and Ole Miss?
No.
I hope not. Do you think then they definitely won't put South Carolina above them? Bama and Ole Miss won the head-to-head.
So when you think about what Clemson did this past weekend, that should be absolutely a no factor in their resume. They played the Citadel. So their resume is exactly the same. And Ole Miss lost to a 6-5 Florida team, and Alabama lost to a 6-5 Oklahoma team. So yeah, they should take a hit, but I do not see them. There's this connection between Georgia and Clemson, obviously, that holds a lot of weight because they played and Georgia smoked them, and Ole Miss beat Georgia, Alabama beat Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And again, they're going to get respect from being in the SEC. And I don't want that to be false respect. I think some of it is that they're in the SEC, therefore they're going to get a nod. But the SEC did perform better than every other conference outside the conference.
For sure. And yeah, just looking at the rankings right quick, unless if they, I guess I'd see them putting Ole Miss and Alabama in between where SMU, right behind SMU. So at the 14th, 15 spots, because I don't see how any of the teams below SMU would jump those 2 teams. So really, they still have a striking chance, given if some mayhem happens. I don't know, maybe Miami loses in their last week, or just something happens to where it knocks them out. I guess
I bet we could go through these rankings right now, re-rank these teams just at a glance, and we'll come very close to what the committee's going to rank. Oregon 1, Ohio State 2, Texas 3, Penn State 4. Then they'll go Notre Dame 5, Miami 6.
Georgia 7.
Yeah, probably Georgia 7.
I would say Tennessee 8, and then maybe Indiana.
Yeah, that's what I would think. Or maybe, yeah.
And then Boise State and SMU. Yeah, that sounds about right, because I don't see any other teams in within the top 13 really dropping as much as Bama and Ole Miss. So yeah, they're gonna still have a fighting chance. And I remember I was watching one of I think the very first CFP selection show. I think someone said on the show that every season, I might be wrong, but every season when it came to the end of the season before the bowl games,
Yeah,
there was at least one 3-loss team ranked inside the top 10 team in every for every season during the college football playoff era.
yes.
So hey, we'll see. I mean, everyone here is saying SEC is down and SEC is not that good. I don't see how they're still not the best conference. I mean, I'll say Big 12, Big 10. I mean, close in the gap. I don't. While they have a lot of mid tier teams, I don't think that they're bad per se. Am I that shocked that Minnesota gave Penn State a big fight? Not really. I think there are a lot of solid teams, but there is a clear gap there. But anyways, we'll see. I appreciate it, Mark. Hope you have a good night, and talk to you later.
Yeah, thanks for the call. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, we will keep it rolling, but we want to remind everyone that we've got a book hot off the presses, Disputed National Champions. You love arguing about this stuff. You're going to love this book. We go through the 1990s. It's not a history book. I'm not going to go through the big explanation right now, but pick it up. It's worth it. The link is in the description section of this video and every video. All right. Next up, we got the real MVP on the line.
Hey, Mark, how you doing this evening?
I'm good.
Well, I've learned today everybody's overrated, so everybody should just move down. Now, I don't know who's going to move up to replace them. Maybe we can just have vacant spots, but nobody's any good. We should just shut down the season. Maybe have Oregon, Ohio State play for the national championship. It's not even worth it to fill the other spots. Nobody's any good. Penn State's not any good. Indiana's not any good. Alabama's not any good. Georgia's not any good. Nobody is worth a darn, Mark. Nobody's any good at all. Everybody's just terrible. Terrible. 2-10. They are the Kent State of college football.
Yeah, when some of these comments are made, there's not a lot of thought behind them because there has to be obviously teams in these spots.
Right. So this is what I'm getting at, Mark.
Yep.
Everybody's saying SEC had a bad day. In my opinion, the SEC had a great day. Because if I'm one step ahead of you and I fall back a step and you also fall back a step, I'm still one step ahead of you. So you know what that means? Alabama, Ole Miss, they're still one step ahead of Colorado, BYU, and all those teams ranked behind them because they also lost today. What non-SEC teams are you going to have replace the SEC teams behind them? SMU, maybe, but they'll get kicked out by Miami. And then South Carolina, if they beat Clemson, they'll get kicked out.
Well, you're making an assumption that SMU
I'm
is going
assuming
to
that
lose.
the committee's not going to put the 23rd best team to number 7 because I don't ever remember the committee over the last decade doing that big of a leap based on 1 week.
Well, you're using the same logic that I used in saying that Indiana, when it was 3:00 this afternoon, they were in really bad shape, but then 3 teams right behind them lost.
That's right. Indiana, in my opinion, is the ultimate winner today. To me, they're locked in the college football playoff. 4 Big Ten teams as of right now, I believe, are surefire, no doubter, locked into the college football playoff, even if they lost every single game. And I'm willing to say that because I look at the data, I look at the stuff, and I just don't see a path for how Oregon, Ohio State, Indiana, and Penn State don't make it, even if they have 3 losses at this point. But all these people saying everybody needs to move down, say, who are you going to replace them with? Mark, can you scroll a little bit lower on that ranking screen for me to see who's underneath? Yeah, even though I don't know about UNLV because they're G5. Illinois needed a last-second miracle to beat Rutgers today. Iowa State played terrible against Utah, won 31-28. Arizona State, I don't know what happened in their game other than this complete chaos at the end of the game. And Missouri is an SEC team. And they're not going to put Tulane to number 7 in the country. So who's going to be there? That's all I want to know, because everybody says the SEC's down, Mark. Honestly, Mark, you know what? In a kind of weird, twisted way, the SEC's got better opportunity today, right now, than they had this morning, because everybody lost, which means if everybody loses, you're bringing teams from further down up into the conversation because teams fell above them. So South Carolina, to me, I absolutely agree with Adam. If they beat Clemson, I think they're going to the college football playoff.
Well, I understand your point, but it still would have been a better day for the SEC if Alabama, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M would have won.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would agree. The only one that I think is completely eliminated now is Texas A&M. They're done. They got no chance because they're just too far down in the rankings. But I wouldn't be surprised, Mark, in the rankings show or even in your rankings. Everybody's talking about there's going to be so much movement. If everybody has the exact same result, you can't move anybody forward past them because there's just too much of a gap behind them to make it up in 1 week. So I think the College Football Playoff Committee is going to look largely the same rankings that they did this week. I'm going to be shocked, Mark, at all if Alabama, Tennessee, Ole Miss were all still ranked inside the top 12. And I know everybody's overlooking it. Boise State, they'll probably fall even worse than them because Boise State needed to have played the worst football game today out of everybody. They need a miracle fourth quarter to beat Wyoming today. Did you see any of that?
No.
Well, trust me, Boise State is showing themselves to be a completely fraudulent football team, Mark. They won 17-13 today against Wyoming. Just completely unacceptable. So, Mark, the real solution is going to come down to a 2-loss SMU team or a 3-loss South Carolina team. Which one would you take?
South Carolina.
Is that SEC bias I'm hearing, Mark? Is that SEC bias? That's what everybody said. Your boy Steve Dace going around the world telling everybody SEC crumbling down. You might want to tell them there's a chance for 5 or 6 SEC teams still make the college football playoff. As of right now, we could have 2 or 3 3-loss teams make the college football playoff, all be from the SEC. And I know that makes everybody upset, but Mark, I told you all, we're entering the new world of college football, and everybody needs to change their thinking.
Well, I do think that these SEC losses today have opened a door for a second ACC team to make it.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. The only problem is the 2 contenders for that being the case. South Carolina plays Clemson next week, so that'll be sailed on the football field. And then if it's SMU that loses to Miami, their resume is just too weak compared to every 3-loss SEC team. They just don't have the wins to back up what they're bringing to the table.
Yeah, but Miami's already ranked ahead of those teams, and SMU is ranked at 13, and they're going to be aided, obviously, by these losses in front of them. And they're going to win a conference championship game.
Right. Well, Mark, I remember last year when Florida State beat Louisville, okay? And Louisville dropped in the rankings. Do you remember that?
Yes.
So why wouldn't the exact same thing happen this year? Miami and SMU both drop in the rankings. I think that's a very high likelihood of happening this year.
Yeah. Well, what is best for the ACC is for SMU to win the ACC championship. If they
Oh,
want,
absolutely.
yeah, if they want the possibility of two teams to make it, sure.
I absolutely, completely agree with you. The something else that's confusing, Mark, is the more interesting point to me is Tulane versus the Big 12, because there's this under the radar story of every Big 12 team keeps collapsing, and Tulane is right there at 20th. Now, I'm not sure if you've looked at the tiebreakers for the Big 12, but assuming all 4 of the Big 12 teams win next week, BYU, Arizona State, Iowa State, and Colorado, if all 4 of them win next week, then it would be Iowa State versus Arizona State in the conference championship game, which are both currently ranked behind Tulane. So do you think there's still a chance that the Big 12 gets completely left out?
Well, Arizona State and Iowa State are going to play games this Saturday that, in Arizona State's case, is not going to help their resume. In Iowa State's case, it's going to help their resume. They've got a game against Kansas State, so that'll give them a little bit of a boost. So I got to think that based on that the Big 12 out of those two teams would want Iowa State to complete the run and finish off by winning against Kansas State and Arizona State to give them the best resume possible. And they also beat Iowa earlier, so they've got a quality non-conference win. And Tulane's going to have a win against Army, correct, in the American Conference Championship game?
Yeah, that's correct. That was the first conference game that was set a week ago.
So we are going to be told a ton when we see where Army's ranked this week. That's going to tell us so much. And I don't think the committee is going to be very kind to a team that lost by 5 touchdowns.
I completely agree. And it wasn't even within 5 touchdowns.
Yeah.
And, Mark, I'm seeing a lot of people in your chat, old ways of thinking. They're in the prehistoric age, I call it, the 4-team college football playoff argument. Mark, are you what your record says you are?
Well, that's a loaded question.
Well, everybody's telling me you can't have 3 losses teams in the playoff. You got to look at the wins. This team won 10 games, therefore they should be in. So I'm asking this. I know it's a loaded question, but people apparently need to be educated.
Well, yes, we are going to have scenarios that are going to dictate that we have 3 lost teams in the playoffs. And most likely that's going to be this year.
I'll even go further out on a limb than that, Mark. I believe multiple 3-loss teams will get in the playoffs this year.
Yeah, I'd have to go through it. We've got 4 in the Big Ten, and we've got Notre Dame. We've got a group of 5. That's 6 spots. We've got an ACC at 7. And let's say we've got a 2-loss team win the Big 12. So that's 8. We got 4 coming out of the SEC. And I guess we're going to think that Georgia, let's say, beats Texas in the conference championship game. So that's 2 of the 4. And then we would have 2 3-loss teams, unless Tennessee's one of them, possibly.
Right. They might be possible, but you know what? They may get passed up by a team that's, in my opinion, I know this is crazy, but I still believe, even though Tennessee beat Bama earlier in the year, I think the committee would put Alabama over Tennessee. I know that doesn't make sense and shouldn't be the case, but I believe that chance exists. Because if you look at these rankings, Alabama is the only team currently ahead of Miami. So the committee clearly views a sizable gap between Alabama and Tennessee.
Well, they did before tonight.
I know. But I wonder if that
Alabama needs to pay for that loss tonight. Like they should pay severely for that loss. Now, it can't necessarily be reflected in the rankings because of, this is what I try to keep telling people, and I tried to tell a caller earlier, that you can't just You can't just present cases and say, where should this team go if they're number 12 and they won or they lost? Where should they go? Well, you got to present everything. And so Alabama's not going to pay as dearly in the rankings as they should under normal circumstances because all these other teams lost. Colorado lost, BYU lost, the two SEC teams lost around them, all that. But their resume and their evaluation in the eyes of the committee should take a beating for what happened tonight.
They should, but how far can they realistically drop because of that beating?
I understand. Those are two different things.
Right. And the one I care about is the second one and not really the first one, because as long as you're in this college football playoff, you got a chance to win.
Well, the reason the first one matters is because then we've got layers to this. Then we'll have conference championship games. And even though Alabama may not take a beating in the rankings this week, if they're unimpressive against Auburn and then some other teams pick up the pace and close out with impressive wins, then again, Alabama should take a beating for losing by 3 touchdowns to Oklahoma.
Correct.
But you're right. There's no question that the committee ranked Alabama at 7 and Tennessee at 11, with Alabama losing to Tennessee by a touchdown. Now, the committee, and we'll never know what the truth is, the committee may tell you that there is a paper-thin margin between those 4 teams. We're looking at 5 teams on the screen.
Right. But, I mean, the committee doesn't clearly value head-to-head as the only prognosticator, because just below... Right, but the example, even if it's super close, is the SMU and BYU, because BYU did beat SMU earlier in the year.
Yeah.
And there was something in that resume gap, according to the committee, that says the head-to-head shouldn't even triumph over it all.
Yeah, I don't remember where that game was played. I even think that game was played at SMU.
I believe so.
And so they even honored a team that lost at home in that head-to-head matchup, so that even flies against the head-to-head even more. They must just evaluate SMU's overall resume to be that much better, obviously.
Right, correct. And I believe with these SEC teams, even though they have additional losses compared to the Big 12 teams and the ACC teams, they're just going to do the exact same thing, because they've shown it all up to this point. All we've done is change the number 2 to the number 3 and the number 1 to number 2. That's all we've done. And yet everybody's minds are exploding and saying, oh my gosh, how could these SEC teams be ranked ahead of these other conferences?
Yeah, they don't have anywhere to fall because the Big 12 has screwed itself with Colorado losing today and BYU losing.
Right, and then Clemson having to play against South Carolina. That'll sort itself out.
Yeah, that's going to sort itself out, but that's actually a good thing for Clemson.
Right, it is. They got the opportunity to undoubtedly prove themselves in. Something else is, it doesn't matter where Miami's ranked. They could literally be ranked, unranked, and they still have a great path to the college football playoff because they just got to win their next 2 games. So I don't understand why people were talking about. I think people are confusing the rankings for the bracketology, Mark. Can you go into depth the difference between the two for some people?
Well, unless those people are evaluating Miami having a chance outside of a conference championship and being number 8 and thinking that they're going to stay in the top 12 with a second loss.
I guess, but I just don't see that being the case with the type of schedule they've played and the close amount of games they've had this season in a significantly weaker conference. They've played with their fire way too much against way too many bad teams.
Well, I would agree, but at this point, again, almost everyone's resume is taking a beating.
Well, absolutely. Well, that's what's going to happen when you got teams with 2 and 3 losses. I mean, I think we all kind of knew this eventually we'd be the byproduct of the 12-team playoff because you've only ever got a few teams at the top that are capable of winning it all. And then you've got a lot of clutter at the 7 through 12 spot.
Yeah, this is really no different than what it would be. We just didn't pay attention to it, or certain people didn't pay attention to it because it didn't matter before what teams were ranked from 5 to 15. But this doesn't look any different than if you grabbed any particular random year over the last 20 years, or certainly during the college football playoff era, and looked at teams 5 through 12 to 15. You would see just a log jam of 9-3 teams, 10-2 teams.
Correct. Now, Mark, I've listed 4 teams earlier in this call that I believe are locked into the playoffs. How many teams right now do you think are absolute surefire locked into the playoffs?
Oregon 1. And because of what happened today, guess Ohio State 2, even if they lose. And Indiana 3, although if they lose to Purdue, could they drop out? I guess that's possible. If Indiana loses to Purdue and goes 10-2, yeah, I think Texas is a lock, and Oregon and Ohio State are locks. And I don't know that there are many locks past Penn State's a lock.
I would agree with that. 4 locks as of currently right now. And this is, again, what we would expect during most seasons of the college football playoff. So everybody acting like this is some massive surprise, I don't really get. Do you get that either?
No, again, all you have to do is look at history and you will see 9-3 and 10-2 teams log jammed into these 10 or 12 spots between 5 and 15 or so.
And something else that doesn't make sense to me is everybody's claiming today wasn't a great day for the SEC. How does this make sense considering every SEC team that lost faced an SEC team? Like, what does Alabama losing to Oklahoma have to do with the Big Ten? Because they didn't even play in that game.
Well, it all depends what we're arguing. If we're arguing, was this a good day for the SEC, meaning did this show that the SEC is weaker than we think it is? Then I agree with your analysis. It doesn't show that because everyone is simply just losing to another team in the conference. But if we're talking about, did it hurt the SEC's chances of placing teams in the playoff? Yeah, it did, because 3 of its primary teams toward the playoff lost to teams that aren't in competition for the playoff.
I would agree with that, but when people act like that the Big Ten has somehow taken a giant leap forward today, or how somehow the SEC is just in a tailspin, I can't get along with that sentiment.
Well, there would have been an issue, let's say in the Big Ten, it would have been a bad day for the Big Ten if Penn State would have lost, for example.
Maybe, yeah, I guess if they only lost and they were completely out, but even if they lost today, they would still be ranked basically where they are, because everyone else on the list behind them lost. So I don't think people are equating, they're just saying, oh, this big brand lost, therefore they need to be heavily punished. But when you have these smaller brands that lose, people have a bias toward them because they want the underdog story and they want to devalue their loss. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What I'm saying basically is once these conferences start to play conference games, anything can be made the narrative. They all finish 500. Every conference finishes 500 when you add up all the records. So you can create any narrative out of the results between the teams in the conference. But what is best for any conference is to have a clear power structure, a clear delineation of its top 4 or 5 teams, so that those teams can be pushed and seen as strong national contenders, rather than having every team in the conference finish 7-5, win their non-conference games, and go 7-5, 8-4. That's not good for any conference.
I agree with you, Mark. But
Yeah.
one of the things that was said before the season by Greg Sankey was, we're going to continue. Well, his thought process. I don't know if he exactly said it word for word, but we're going to continue playing these major out of conference games that the committee values them, strength of schedule, and all that stuff. If all we're doing is going off record, Mark, put the SEC on the Indiana plan for the next 15, 20 years. So I'm greatly looking forward to the rankings because I want to see what's actually valued. Playing great teams week in and week out, or just playing cream puffs the entire season.
Yeah, well, I don't know that the committee is consistent in making those evaluations. It depends on who is beating up on the cream puffs.
Oh, I get you, but for the SEC, Mark, if it would be demoralizing if we play all these, the goal of this season, according to Greg Sankey, was to introduce parity. That was the stated goal of the schedule. And I believe the reason he wanted to do that was to increase the amount of teams that could make the college football playoff. So if this experiment backfires on him, I think we're going to get far less parity in the SEC going forward. So if people like the chaos and stuff, you should have more SEC teams in the playoff, not less.
All right, DeReal. Anything else?
No, it's good talking to you, Mark. I'm looking forward to your top 25 that makes sense, and I'm looking forward to 6 or 7 SEC teams being in there and maybe 5 or 6 of them in the top 12.
Yeah, most likely. We shall see.
Yeah. What conference is the best, Mark? Can you answer that on the way out?
The best conference in college football is the SEC.
Okay. And would you be willing to debate anybody on that?
Absolutely.
Okay, I saw like 5 or 6 people say the Big Ten was better than the SEC, so I'd love for them to call in and explain why.
Yes, I am here.
Have a good one.
All right, DeReal. Thank you. All right, we've got this individual on the line. 5. Hello, 5.
Hey, what's up, Mark? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, so
Gotcha.
the first thing I want to say is we have to establish that the committee is going to do whatever they want to do because there's really no criteria. It's completely subjective. So and no one has any idea what those rankings are going to look like.
So do you mind real quick? I would just like to interrupt you once, and then I'll let you say whatever you need to say. Just because this is my perspective on what you just stated. I'll say it this way, that the committee has criteria. There is stated criteria. We could go through it. Best wins, ranked wins, good losses in quotes, or bad losses, strength of schedule, strength of record, dominance, game control. There's all sorts of factors that they supposedly weigh. The issue that I have is that they have this punch list and they pick and choose which items they want to use depending on the team or the situation.
Nope, that's 100% right. Yeah, no, that's better. Yeah, that's technically, no, that's right. I mean, they're going to pick and choose, like you said, from whatever, pertinent stat they think matters more to them to rank these, because it is. I mean, and let's be honest, nobody wants to be the committee right now. They have an unbelievably hard decision to make Tuesday night with how they're going to rank really a couple back-end teams, because earlier you guys had kind of shown the rankings where we pretty much know who's going to be like the top 7 or 8. Once you get outside of that is when it starts getting a little weird.
Yep.
But the Bama game, specifically for me, because I just have a problem with this. Bama and Ole Miss, both of them losing, they're not out. Unfortunately, I wish they were. I can't stand either team. I wish they were out. But with Bama, for me, like you were just saying a second ago, you can't lose to there's 6. They have 6 wins now, but you can't lose by 3 touchdowns, not even score an offensive touchdown, and then I feel like just disregard that and essentially keep Alabama in the play. And they may not do this, but the Bama, I know they beat Georgia. Like, there's things they can hang their hat on, But that's got to hold a lot of weight, especially 2 weeks to go in the season. How you're playing now should matter a lot, even if Alabama has like one really good win against Georgia. I don't think Bama specifically with that loss should be in the playoff. I just think that is such a bad loss.
So Notre Dame should not be in the playoff.
And I understand that too. I understand.
I'm just following your statement.
Yeah, for me, it's not just one specific loss. Like I said, it's subjective, so we start going deeper than that. Obviously, Bama does have a good win, and I do value great wins. Notre Dame's got a decent win. They took a hit tonight with A&M. It's not their schedule's. It's pitiful. Let's just be honest. It is. So I'm not even a fan of Notre Dame being ranked as high as they are. I'm not saying that Alabama necessarily isn't going to get in, because it's a difficult decision right now. There's so many teams that have like arguments. So it's not like necessarily they shouldn't be considered. But for me, what starts to matter the most is like who's getting hot right now, who's, like South Carolina, for example. I would actually rank South Carolina, if they win and they beat Clemson, I would rank them ahead of Alabama, even though Bama beat them head to head.
Okay, so you're bringing up an interesting topic, an interesting angle to all this. So to you, and I don't know if you think of it this way, the schedule's weighted. The results are weighted. You are weighting the results. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying it's a different way to look at it. So basically, we should actually, if we take your approach to this, meaning we want the teams that are playing the best now, the best at the end of November, then we should have the record. You would see a team's record. They're 11-1, they're 10-2, they're 9-3, but we would see a weighted record as well, because we would weight a game the last weekend of November the most, and then we would weight the game the weekend before slightly less, and then slightly less, and then slightly less, and then slightly less, and it would all add up to 12. But maybe the first weekend of the season, that game's only worth like 1/12 of a win.
I wouldn't look at it that way. More or less what I'm saying.
It sounds like what it is.
More or less what I'm saying is, because we're splitting hairs here, right? Like everyone has a legit argument for whatever team you want. I'm not saying with that specific argument. I'm saying that in general, you really could pick. I could make an argument for Alabama. You know what I'm saying? Like that one win they would have over Georgia is a better win than a lot of these other teams have, and winning on the field against a good team is much more of an accomplishment than half of these other teams have had. So I'm not trying to like
LSU. They beat South Carolina.
LSU's not a great win because they just got hammered by Florida, and they're like they have 4 losses, right? But I know what you mean.
But it's on the road better than most of the wins that all these teams have. Like if we took the LSU game, they're 7-4 right now against the 10 or 11 teams that we're looking at right now, that would be a better win than over 80% of their wins.
Yeah, that's true. It's very true. But once again, you could probably, like, even looking at a team like Indiana, Oklahoma's what, the 4th worst team in the SEC? Like, they're not a good team. Like, they're objectively like really bad. And that's a horrific loss. Like, that's
a really good defense.
It's a really, really bad loss. I mean, it's
a really bad loss also because of how badly they got beaten.
Exactly. That's my point. It's not just losing. They didn't score a touchdown today.
Sure. But they did play, and I ran into some phone call probably a month ago, and somebody was telling me, just going on and on about how bad Oklahoma was. And I said, well, yes, overall, when you look at the results, they are not a good football team, but they do have one of the best defenses in the country. Like, they have a really good defense. Nobody's doing anything against their defense. Like, Texas didn't even do much against their defense. Don't look at the final score.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a hard position for the committee to be in because you can pretty much make an argument for a handful of teams, and I would not necessarily dock you for it. But I don't know. I already have a problem with Notre Dame being ranked as high as they were, but now that all these teams are lost, and like
Sure.
the guy, what he was just saying, it's just weird, like it's a crazy year where other than like we said, the top like five, maybe there's like five teams, like the first five is pretty much set in stone of how they'll be ranked. Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, those four, we all know that'll be like the top four. But I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. I'm just so sick of, I feel like, Alabama, like for them losing this game badly, right? Like it wasn't like it was some weird outcome, that Hail Mary or like final possession. I would even, honestly, I'd even have Ole Miss, who had two really bad losses. I would probably rank them a spot ahead of Alabama after today, honestly.
Yeah. So again, I do think that Alabama needs to be punished for what happened tonight, especially when you consider they lost to Vanderbilt as well.
Right,
But,
right.
And Vandy's a decent team, but playoff teams shouldn't lose to decent teams. And now Alabama's lost to a decent team, Vandy, and they've lost to a pretty bad team, a marginal team in Oklahoma by 3 touchdowns. But again, I don't know where you drop them. Like, okay, Miami moves ahead of Alabama, and I'm not really convinced Miami's a better team than Alabama, but as of now, they've got a better resume.
To me, and see, that's where, the committee is going to do what they want to do with this. But at some point, I also feel like, and I hate using this term, but I feel like you have to when you get to a funky year like this. But certain teams like Miami, for example, if Miami beats Syracuse and SMU win, I don't even know they play next week, but they win as well, and both those teams meet in the ACC championship game with one loss, I think the loser, assuming they don't get beat, 45-0, should get in still over a team like Alabama.
Just because they have 2 losses and not 3.
No, not because of that, but because I value, like even last year, I thought it was, to me, when you make it to a conference championship game. So first of all, the committee already has Alabama, what is it, 1 spot ahead of Miami?
Yes.
So logically speaking, you would think they would drop behind Miami.
Yes.
Tuesday. So if Miami win, we already know Miami's got issues. Like their defense is awful. I would probably pick Bama to beat Miami if they played them. Like, let's just be honest. But if they make it to the ACC championship game and they're already a couple spots ahead of them, assuming they don't get embarrassed, by SMU, I just have a hard time believing you punish a team for making a conference championship game and dropping them that many spots back, assuming, like I said, they don't get annihilated.
But the thing about qualifying for a conference championship game is you can have just as good a season and not qualify for a conference championship. That's kind of it's somewhat arbitrary.
Yep.
We were looking at the ACC a few weeks ago, and Miami, Clemson, and SMU were all undefeated in the conference, and therefore, if they all would have finished their schedules and just won all the games, somebody would have been left out, and they would have been undefeated in the conference, but not made the conference championship game.
Yep.
So I don't know that Miami's situation is even more bolstered by winning against Syracuse next week to get to the conference championship game.
No, that win doesn't do them. That means Syracuse is also not they're like a 7-win team, but it's for me more or less. Sure. Yeah, for me, or more or less with that is just, I think that just like if whoever makes it to Atlanta, the SEC championship game, I think that the losers guarantee, assuming, I think Georgia plays Tech, so they have to beat Tech. But assuming both teams meet with 2 losses, I don't think the loser's out. Like, I think the loser just gets in. I don't think they're going to punish.
We're talking about Alabama not being out, and they got 3 losses, and they're not going to an SEC championship game. So sure.
Yeah, it was.
Or-
Yeah, so like if it was Texas, or we already know Texas is in, they're a lock. But if it was A&M, for example, and like let's say, I don't know, A&M beats Georgia, I think Georgia would still get in with 3 losses.
So you're telling me that if Miami loses a second game in the ACC championship game to SMU 45-10, that just because they have 2 losses and not 3.
No, I think they'd be out for that. Yeah, I don't think you'd have to keep it competitive. You'd have to give the committee, because the committee already said on one of the last rankings show that they're going to, every single game, including conference championship, is going to be evaluated towards the ranking. So winning or losing those games, and by margin and all that's going to affect it. But no, if Miami gets blown out, which we all have already established, we all know the SEC is the best conference. We all know that the ACC and the Big 12 are probably the 2 easiest, or the 2 worst P4 conferences. But yeah, if it's Miami or SMU, if either one of them gets annihilated in the ACC championship game, I don't think they'll be able to stay in the top 12. It's got to be like a competitive game. Like if it's a close game, I don't think they'll jump out. I really don't. There was just too much carnage today.
Again, like we've been talking about with these other callers, the issue is that even though Alabama should be punished for losing to Oklahoma, other than dropping behind Miami, and then whatever the committee wants to do with the Ole Miss and Georgia and Tennessee situations, because obviously Ole Miss and Georgia, or Ole Miss just lost as well.
Right.
Alabama's going to have 1 more loss than Georgia, but they beat them head to head. They should be ranked below Tennessee because they're going to have a worse record, and they lost to Tennessee now, which is kind of strange that they may not drop below Georgia because they beat them head to head, but they would possibly be justified in dropping below Tennessee, which they should, because they'll have a worse record and a head-to-head loss. So that doesn't make any sense the way that's set up. But after that, Boise State just barely beat one of the worst teams in the country. So I don't know that you can justify dropping Alabama below Boise State. And then I guess you justify them dropping behind SMU just because SMU's 9-1 and Alabama's 8-3. Or I guess SMU won today, so they're 10-1.
Yeah, I think SMU will jump.
And Alabama's 8-3. So I guess, even though I don't know that SMU's got a better resume than Alabama,
they
don't. But then once you get past SMU, then you really can't justify dropping them, because BYU just lost again, Texas A&M just lost, Colorado just lost, all these teams just lost, and then you're hitting South Carolina, who Alabama beat, and they've got the same record now.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand. Like it's going to be a Tuesday night's going to be chaos. I can tell you that. It's going to be ridiculous. But no matter what they do, I don't think the committee honestly can make like a bad decision, because like I've already said, you could really make an argument for a handful of teams. But it's just crazy to me that we're looking at a world where someone can lose in the second to last week of their schedule to a bad team and still probably sneak their way in the playoff.
Yep.
But that's where we're at.
Well, I appreciate the call.
Yeah.
And call back anytime.
All right. Peace.
All right. We really need to work through these calls. Like, we're going to go 1 minute timer on the final 3 here. We're at 2:42 a.m. and I've been doing this since noon. So we're at 15 hours. So here we go. We got Spaz checking in. Spaz, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going, Mark?
Good.
Seems like you've been. I know you've been going for quite a while. I was shocked when I looked over and saw you were still going. I was like,
well,
wow.
I've only been on here for 2 hours, but my day starts at noon doing all this stuff. So yeah, it's been about 15 hours. So
yeah, I just before I say much, I just wanted to say thank you for the honor and privilege of co-hosting the Oregon show with Ben.
Of course.
Appreciate you giving me the opportunity to work on your shows.
I appreciate you doing it.
Going to today, it reminds me of 2007. Does it have that 2007 feel to you?
Well, it's a different formula, obviously. 2007 was crazy because you could jam, uh, there was no way to jam 8 teams into the national championship game, but you had about 8 teams that had an argument. You could have made all sorts of arguments for Kansas, and of course LSU and Ohio State were there, but you had West Virginia and you had Georgia and you had USC and you had all these teams all over the place that had an argument. And I didn't think it was fair. That's why we've got a certain caller that calls me all the time here that doesn't want a playoff, and it's like, you have to have a playoff because that's the American way to play the games on the field to determine who the best teams are. And I would never want to go back to trying to sort out. Can you imagine sorting this out?
This week out? Yeah.
Yeah, without having games on the field. So, yeah, it does bring us back to 2007.
I'm just shocked with, all the different, you got this 12-team thing going now, but you got all this Big Ten, SEC, rivalry bias, whatever you want to call it, going on. And it cracks me up because earlier this year, when Oregon was first coming into the Big Ten, we had all these SEC people and a lot of Big Ten people were saying that, Oregon doesn't belong. They don't have the guys in the trenches. They don't have the size. And look at what we've done. I mean, the resume is there. Is it a great resume? No. Your point of going back to the losses and wins and stuff, you could say Boise State was a bad win per se for Oregon, but yet they're 11 or 10-1, and their only loss was to the number 1 team on the second week of the season. Now you play that game today, it's probably a different outcome because we had offensive line issues and other things going on. But you still, when the game was played, Boise State lost on the last play of the game.
Yeah, I don't consider that to be a bad win or a great win, either one. It would be a great win in my mind if Oregon would have beaten them 35-10. But Boise State's a really good team that has won all of its games. And so for me, it's not like if Oregon beat, if they would have beat Purdue 37-34 in the last play of the game. Now that would be a bad win. That would be like, ugh, how did that happen?
Yeah.
So I don't consider that like this, wow, we should hold up this as this monumental win. This is great because it is a group of 5 and it is a good team, but they're not the 12th best team in the country. They're probably more like the 25th best team in the country, something like that. And so I think it's a decent win, but if they would have dominated, I would say it's a great win. Or if it was the same, but it was against a worse team, I would say, well, that's not a good win. So I think it's a decent win.
Hence the Penn State, Minnesota today. I mean, they barely escaped out of there.
Yeah.
And that's a reason why games like that are reasons why a lot of people are saying, how is Penn State ranked so high when they can barely beat teams like Minnesota by 1 point?
But I could make the argument that Minnesota is just as good, if not better, than Boise State.
Exactly. Their record doesn't show it, but their play on the field does.
And I know that may not sound reasonable to a lot of people, but if you really look at the results of the group of 5 and the Power 5 every year, the Power 5 wins about close to 90% of those games. And last year, for example, if you took all the the group of 5 champions and their record against the Power 5, I used to have that number in my head, what the exact number, but they went like 4-15 against the Power 5. There is a huge gap. Now, that doesn't mean Boise State's not a good team, and they geared up, I'm sure, for Oregon, and on occasion, they can play a great game. But if you threw Boise State in the Big Ten, they wouldn't be a team teams would want to play. I'm not saying that they wouldn't be competitive, but that grind of playing Oregon, then playing Washington, then playing Illinois, then playing Iowa, then playing Minnesota, then playing Ohio State, then playing, that would be a bit much for them.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Mark. Well, thanks for letting me on. I don't want to tie you up too long. I know you're probably wanting to hit the head soon.
Yeah, I'm about ready. So, well,
all right.
Thanks for not making it a difficult argument on me, because I was thinking when I'm running on fumes, my brain's scattered, and I'm not ready to take up too many arguments at this point. So,
right. That's why I didn't. We'll get you next week when we get to the Big Ten title.
let's do that.
All right, Mark.
All right.
Good night.
Have a good night. Appreciate
You
it.
too. Bye.
All right. I think we only have one other caller. We had somebody else drop off the line. We got Roman here. Roman, what's going on? Ramon. I'm sorry.
You can hear me, right, Mark?
I can.
All right. I think everybody's been waiting for me to call in because I've been on the chat. I've been a little vocal on the chat.
All right. What do you got for us?
I'm trying to defend wins. I don't feel like the teams that are winning are getting enough credit, Mark.
Okay.
Penn State wins, and everybody wants to rip them. Oklahoma wins, so we talk about how bad Alabama is and not give credit to Oklahoma dominating them, etc., etc., etc.
Yep.
So I know it's been a long night for you, and I don't want to make it too complicated. I just have one simple question.
Yeah.
So what is more to you? What do you value more, resume and schedule or wins? Because, well, before you answer, I don't think it's fair to the teams that, okay, they're given a certain schedule and they win. They can't control who they play. So they win every game on their schedule, and I feel like they don't get enough credit for that. I understand, okay, you're in a weak conference or you play weak opponents, etc. I understand that whole argument too, but I don't think it's fair to the teams that actually win. I don't feel like they're getting enough credit. What would you say about that?
All right. Well, my answer is going to be a little bit more nuanced than just a black and white answer, and this is why.
Okay.
So these teams, you are correct. Once they step into conference play, they have no control over who they play.
Right.
So, for example, I heard a stat the other day that Indiana had played 7 of the 8 worst teams in the Big Ten. Not their problem, not their issue. They were handed a schedule. And even the Big Ten cannot predict who's going to be the best teams in the conference, the middle teams in the conference, or the worst teams in the conference. I won't go on a scheduling tirade because I do think that there should be certain measures put in place, and I've produced all sorts of videos and outlines on how the conference scheduling could be done better and it could be more fair and more equitable. But
yeah, it's uneven. It's uneven in the SEC, Big Ten, etc.
Absolutely, it's uneven everywhere. However, these teams do control who they play in non-conference play. So if Indiana would have lost this game, let's say against Ohio State, and this other upheaval would not have occurred, and they would have, let's say, dropped out of playoff contention and not been selected, while I would feel for them on one level, they didn't choose to play anyone in non-conference play. They played Charlotte and Florida International. Yeah. I'm sorry, what?
Mm-hmm. No, I get your point. Florida International, I live 1 mile from there, by the way.
Okay.
Go FIU. But yeah, I get your point. So you don't play anybody in non-conference.
Okay, and let me make another point about that. So teams like Indiana decided not to play anyone, and I'm sure it did not cross anyone's mind in the athletic department at Indiana when they were doing their football scheduling for 2024 that they would possibly be competing for a playoff spot. So that didn't come up. Ohio State didn't play anyone in non-conference play, but there's also a couple considerations there. Number one, they're Ohio State, so nobody's going to bat an eye if they run through the Big
Exactly.
Ten and don't play anyone in non-conference play. Also, they did have Washington scheduled, but that became a conference situation, so they had to knock that off the schedule. So anyway, and then also understand that there's a difference between intent and reality. What turns out to be reality. So for example, Michigan had a horrendous 2023 non-conference schedule, 2022 and 2021, all 3 years,
And won it
horrible
all.
non-conference schedules. I'm sorry, what?
Right.
But in 2021,
No, right, exactly. So a weak non-conference schedule, and they won it all.
Yes. Anyway, in 2021, they scheduled Washington. Well, when they scheduled Washington, there was a expectation that Washington would be a really good team because they were a really good team when they scheduled them. They turned out not to be a good team, but that's not Michigan's issue.
Right.
So there should be some level of respect for the intent. However, the opponent still needs to be evaluated based on who they are that particular season. So when you say wins should be valued, so you would just line up all the teams that won the most games and they would go to the playoff.
No, I think you brought me back to a middle ground. You know, obviously, if you play Popcorn State the first 4 weeks, you know, that's a little weaker. But my whole point is, I feel like teams that are winning are not getting enough credit. I mean, Indiana's done everything they can on their schedule. Penn State. I'll give you another example that I brought up on the chat. Oklahoma. Everybody wants to talk about, oh, Alabama is not good, or Alabama this and that. No one saying that Oklahoma dominated Alabama. Nobody. And I don't think that's fair. Like, the team that wins should get credit, and that's my whole point.
Well, I think one of the things is the reason is, number one, we're a pessimistic society. Therefore, we tend to trash teams and players and coaches rather than give credit to teams, players, and coaches. So we focus on the negative side. We focus on, how did that team lose that game? How did they screw it up? They're no good, rather than giving credit to the winner. We just tend to do that.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, so that's number one. Number two, also consider that Oklahoma is not in the running for a playoff spot. So they're not the ones being evaluated.
So no one cares.
So no one cares what they're doing. It's more about who's in competition for the playoff and what did they do and how are we going to evaluate them.
Right. I get your point, but I watched the game tonight. I saw, I'm not an Oklahoma or Alabama fan. I'm a Miami fan, but I watched the game and Oklahoma dominated that game. But no one's talking about that. Oklahoma dominated, you know, obviously for the reasons that you said. Also, Florida won. I haven't heard anybody mention Florida. Florida's doing really good. Beat Mississippi today on the upswing. But obviously, like you said, it's teams that I guess don't matter because they have 5 losses.
Yeah,
and that makes sense.
The focus is on the team that lost the game because they were in competition for a playoff. And so the evaluation's about them.
Correct.
But I agree with.
No, I get it.
And here we do our best to talk about all of college football and do our best to talk about teams that aren't in competition for the playoff. And I certainly had a lot of good things to say about Florida today and posted a video, and the same thing with Oklahoma tonight. But yeah, that's just human nature.
No, totally. I mean, there's give and takes argument. I mean, obviously, you're a good football team. You win all the games on your schedule. It's not, if you're a football player, it's not your fault that you're playing, you know, you're winning. You're doing everything you can to win every game. Sometimes they don't. And there's most of the time, those teams don't finish on top. So I took that side of the argument. One last question before I go. I know that you're ready to go. I want to ask you about Miami Hurricanes. Do you have enough faith in their defense? Do you think they have a chance with a good quarterback like Cam Ward to run the table, or at least to the Final Four? Or do you think they're kind of a fluky team that's won, you know, maybe more games than they should?
Well, I don't consider them a fluky team because I think that they're better than everybody they played on their schedule. I think that if they would have played up to their capabilities, they should be undefeated right now. So they
Right.
did escape a few games. That doesn't mean that they can't
Right,
be beaten
exactly.
because, of course, they escaped against Virginia Tech and Cal, but they also could have won the Georgia Tech game. So I think their record is about what they should be right now.
Hmm.
I think that they're a dangerous team because they've got a quarterback who's as good as anybody in the country. I
Exactly.
don't necessarily. I think he could get himself into trouble the way he plays at times,
Right.
doing too many pirouettes and spin moves in the pocket when he's going to be playing better defenders, bigger, faster, more skilled defensive players off the edge. And obviously, when he chucks the ball across his body in the middle of the field at times. But that's a very small negative compared to the huge positive and upside that he is, as when he's hot, he's better than anybody.
Hmm.
So with him and with the receivers they have, Xavier Restrepo in particular, I'm not going to go through all the receivers, but Restrepo I point out just because he's a more gifted and more polished receiver than the other guys they have. They
Right.
got
He's
a
the
great
veteran. Yeah.
they got a great 1-2 punch with Fletcher and Damian Martinez in the backfield. The offensive line's really good. The offense, when it's clicking, can be as good as any offense in the country. The defense might be able to get away with and may actually improve in the playoff because the defensive front's so good.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I think this team is dangerous to win one game. I would have very
Until
little
you run
confidence.
into Ohio State, for example, etc. Right? You know.
Yeah, I have little confidence that they would go through, let's say, Ohio State, Georgia, and Texas 3 games in a row.
That's what makes this 12-team playoff. Like you really have to earn it this time around.
Yes. Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, Mark, last one, and I'll let you go. I know you're ready to go. Just quarterbacks, the top college football quarterbacks: Dylan Gabriel, Cam Ward. Who else would?
I'm
Who
losing
do you
you.
think are the best quarterbacks in college football?
Best quarterbacks in college football. Off the top of my head, I would say I would go Shadur Sanders 1, Cam Ward 2.
Really, Sanders 1. Okay, I respect it.
Yeah.
Cam Ward,
Uh,
Gabriel's got to be on the list. Yeah,
yeah, as a college quarterback, yes. I don't think he's much of a
as a
pro
college, I'm talking
prospect.
about college, not NFL. Do you have a couple others? Do you have 2 more? Who would you say, just if you had to think off the top of your
Well,
head?
he had a really awful last 3 minutes of play today, but I think Jackson Dart's really good.
I respect that one.
And
Yeah. You got one more?
and I think this guy, I would have told you about a month ago that he's got a really high floor because I'd never seen him play a poor game, but he has the last month, and that's Carson Beck.
Carson Beck. Interesting. That's controversial. A lot of people don't like Carson Beck.
Well, I know a lot of people don't like him. People overreact, I think.
Right. I agree.
But
But you would throw him up there. That's interesting that you would have Carson Beck. I mean, Georgia wins. You
I
can't
do
argue
think
with
Drew
winning. That's
Aller's
my
a
whole
better
point in this
quarterback.
whole conversation.
I think Drew Aller's a better quarterback than people give him credit for if he had better weapons. Those are the guys that come to mind. I'm sure
Mark,
I'm missing
you look
people.
like you're ready to go to bed. Let me ask you about Manning for Texas.
Yeah.
Do you think he's a good pro pot? I mean, obviously he has his uncles, etc. Do you think that he has a chance to flop? Do you think like he's a sure thing to? Obviously, he's going to make the NFL just because of name brand,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
But you have to prove it on the field. He played a little bit this year, but against poor competition.
Exactly. That was
But
going to be my point. I want to see him play a good team.
Is he way better than yours, or not necessarily?
That's what I hear. I haven't really. I've seen some of the highlights, but I haven't really watched him play. And again, we need to see him play a good team.
Right.
He hasn't even played a full college game against a good team.
Exactly. So it's nobody knows exactly.
But apparently, he's better than Ewers.
Apparently, he's better than yours. You think
That's what I
yours
hear
is
from
not
people
good?
that know.
Is yours good or not good in your opinion?
Quinn Ewers is not quite as good as I thought he was going into this year. I thought he was going to be roughly a top 5 quarterback in the country. I think he's more around 10 to 15.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So we'll see. One last thing. Watching the game, because I watched the Alabama-Oklahoma game. Jackson Arnold obviously hasn't had a great season, but watching him tonight reminded me, I mean, he looks a lot like Josh Allen. At least tonight he did.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you see any resemblance with that? Just his big
Yeah, I'll go
frame,
with
running
that.
the football.
Sure. And
Five-star.
people may not be aware, Josh
I don't know if
Allen,
he's
if you
going to
went back and
transfer
looked at
out or
Josh
not,
Allen's
but
stats in college, they are not impressive.
really, at Wyoming, right?
Yeah,
Wasn't
he's
all
like
that?
a 56% passer.
Exactly. So sometimes you have the tools, but it doesn't, it'll translate to in both ways. Gabriel, for example, great college quarterback, might not be good in the pros. And then the other way around, it could go the other way around too.
All righty.
All right, Mark, have a good night, man. Thanks for taking my call.
I appreciate it.
All right, guys, have a good one, everybody.
You too. All right, folks. We are here at the Voice of College Football. Do see that we had about 600 plus people on the line, including the folks on Twitter. So thanks for being here at the Voice of College Football. I would ask that you would subscribe to our Ole Miss channel, even if you could care less about Ole Miss and don't care for the SEC, hate the SEC, whatever your fandom is. If you like what we do here at the Voice of College Football, we've got to build up these channels. And right now we're focusing on the Ole Miss channel. So please subscribe to the Ole Miss channel. And I would like to be able to tell you where to find that in terms of a link. But you know what? I'm going to put it in there. This is where you can find the Ole Miss channel. And as soon as we get safely above 1,000 subs, go ahead and unsubscribe. But get us to 1,000 subs, because until you get 1,000 subs, YouTube does not take you seriously. It does not promote your work, your content, or put it into traffic. So I have just left the Ole Miss channel in the chat. So please follow that link and subscribe to the Ole Miss channel. I will be forever indebted. Adam's got a comment here. He says, Mark, Florida just beat LSU in a previously 9th ranked Ole Miss team. Could you make an argument that Florida is among the 12 best? Could I make an argument that Florida is one of the 12 best teams in the country? Not quite top 12, but really not that far behind that. If we just discarded records and just talked about talent, talked about how well teams play against other teams, yeah, I would say there are 4 or 5 teams in the Big Ten that are definitely better than Ole Miss, or better than Florida. And probably 2 to 3 teams in the ACC that are definitely better than Florida. Although I don't know that any of us, that seems ridiculous on the surface. But I think to Adam's point, Clemson might be the second best team in the ACC. They might be the best team in the ACC. And would anybody be shocked here if Florida and Clemson played at a neutral site if Florida won? I wouldn't be. I would not be shocked if Florida beat any team in the Big 12. And I believe that Alabama, Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, etc., Texas A&M are better teams than Florida. However, keep in mind, we just saw Florida beat Ole Miss today. We saw Florida take Tennessee to overtime. We saw Florida beat LSU. LSU is one of the 25 best teams in the country. I don't care what those stupid college football playoff rankings say. LSU is better than probably 5 or 6 of those teams at least. They're better than Army. Do we really believe that Arizona State would beat LSU at a neutral field? So there we go. All right, folks. Appreciate you being here, the voice of college football. I'm going to be live in 8 hours minus 8 minutes. So you can give me a call tomorrow morning. And this week, it's championship week. It's rivalry weekend, championship week the next week. I'm losing my mind. It's 3 a.m. But man, I may do a video projecting the college football playoff rankings. And I also want to go through each conference and set up the scenarios for the conference championship game. All right, we'll do that. And the top 25 that actually makes sense is coming out tomorrow as well. So get some sleep. Appreciate you being here. We enjoyed it as always, and we'll see you next time.